Hey, New City, welcome back to House Church. Welcome back to a space where you are encouraged and challenged to grow as we continue to discover what it means to follow Jesus, to be disciples of Jesus, and to make disciples of Jesus. I want to start off by doing a shout out to our kids and our kids workers that are right now taking our kids downstairs, most likely in the home that you're at. I just want to say a huge thank you to the entire New City community for the way that we've come together and taken on ownership and responsibility over teaching our kids and loving our kids. I think it's been really beautiful to see how we're tackling that together as a community. Every time that you are involved in speaking into a kid's life or just teaching them a lesson or just encouraging them, that goes a long way. So I just want to say a huge thank you to everyone that's been a part of that. Today, at the very end of our session, the kids are going to join us. They're going to come upstairs and we're going to wrap up our session by hearing what they've been learning, what they've been hearing from God as they've been discovering God's truth through Bible stories. And then we're going to take some time to pray together and pray over our kids as well at the very end. So House Church leader, make sure you make note of that at the very end of this session. Call up your kids worker, call up the kids, and let's hear what they've been learning. Okay, in just a moment, we're gonna dive into today's focus, our next 519 story. You might be aware already that we've been really excited about this. Really excited to have Joshua's story shared with us today. But before we do that, I'd like for us to maybe take a moment and engage in worship through reflection. The Bible is full of many stories and characters before Jesus' time and after Jesus' time. And we see examples of what it looks like to follow Jesus through his disciples. We see examples of what it means to pursue God in the Old Testament. And there's some good examples and some bad examples. There's some examples of caution. There's some examples where you go, hey, I need to follow this. And other examples that make you go, hey, I should not make the same mistake as this person. One of the great examples we have is David, known as King David, and before that known as the shepherd boy David. He's anointed as king as a young man and eventually becomes one of the greatest kings Israel had. He's described as a man after God's own heart. King David was someone that was very much in tune with his emotions. You always knew what David was feeling. When he was angry, you see it in the Psalms, you knew it. His words that he would use and the language that he used clearly expressed that he was angry. When he was sad, you knew it. You look at Psalm 51, when he was repentant, you could see that and hear that in the language that he used. When he was happy, you could tell. There's stories of him dancing wildly in the streets when he's full of joy. This is someone you could describe as in tune with their emotions. And oftentimes when he was feeling something, he would write down what he was feeling. And now we have this collection of thoughts or poems or songs in the Psalms. And you've got the Psalm of David, and then you have other songs as well in there from other people that have done the same thing. And I'm wondering if you were to take that concept of the Song of David, if you take that idea and then remove the name David and insert your name there, what's your song today? What are you feeling today? What are the emotions that you're feeling right now? Is it joy? Is it anger? Is it sadness? Is it confusion? Is it hope? Is it encouragement? What are you feeling today? And so I'd love to nudge us into a space where we can actually reflect on what we're feeling and then possibly even explore what God might be trying to speak to us through the emotions that we're feeling right now. So in just a moment, a 5-minute countdown is going to come on the screen. I encourage you to just close your eyes, lean back, and reflect on how you're feeling today. Maybe try and think of one word that captures what you're feeling. What's your song today? What's the song of Tanya? What's the song of Bernie? What's the song of Emily? What's the song of Trevor? Can you insert your own name there and discover what your song is this morning? So take 5 minutes, just reflect for a moment, and then we're going to continue from there. Perhaps you were already in tune with your emotions before we did this. Maybe you're already very aware of what you're feeling, or perhaps this actually created space and room for you to actually self-assess what you might have been feeling for a while, maybe for the last few weeks, or just the last few days, or even just this morning. I really hope that time was beneficial. I want to give us time now to actually share with our house church what we're feeling. And if you don't have the words, that's okay. Maybe you want to share, I'm actually feeling sad and I don't know why. Or I'm feeling anxious and I'm not sure why. Or I can't quite find the words to describe what I'm feeling. It's okay to even just say that. I want to give you space to share with your house church. And then I'm going to invite your house church leader to actually lead the group or the house or the home into a time of prayer. Maybe pray over some of the things that have been mentioned. Pray over some of the things God is speaking through people's emotions in the room. Take some time to share what you're feeling, how you're feeling, and then take some time to pray together. And then we're going to jump into our 519. There are certain things within the New City community that are extremely valuable to us. I think I could even say that they are a core part of our DNA. They're a big part of our foundation. There's a lot of non-essential things, but there's a few essential things that we stick to no matter what. And I love how when Paul's writing, he says, if you're going to boast about anything, boast of what the Lord has done. When I boast about the things that I've accomplished and about how great I am, then I'm pointing people towards me. And at the end of the day, I don't have the power necessary to transform someone's life. At the end of the day, I am a human. We are humans. And we're doing our best to be like Jesus. And people can look at us and can see some good examples, but also some examples of warning or caution. And ultimately, Jesus is the best example we have for what it looks like to live a godly life. And ultimately, it is Jesus that is capable of bringing about deep transformation in our lives. It's why we believe so strongly that each person needs to have a chance to encounter Jesus, to get to know Jesus, to build relationship with Jesus. We still believe and will continue to believe that Jesus is the hope of the world. And so something that's really important to us is to share how Jesus is impacting our lives. It's something that we're very intentional about. We set aside time to share and talk about what Jesus is doing in our lives and has done in our lives, and are hopeful about what he will continue to do in our lives. A few months ago, we got to hear Annie's story, and that was the launch of our 519 series. Phenomenal, remarkable story of healing, of forgiveness. It was mind-blowing, and I just want to say a huge thank you again to Annie for giving us the privilege of being a part of walking alongside her as she shared with us some of the things God has done in her life. Today, we're going to hear Joshua's story. And I want to encourage you as you step into this to reflect on your own story as well. As you're thinking and as you're listening to this story, how does this maybe connect to your own journey with God? Can you relate in any way? Have you had a similar experience? Can you relate maybe to the emotions that Joshua was feeling in the different stages of his life? What words come to mind? I'm really excited for us to hear this story. I'm extremely grateful to Joshua for saying yes to this and for being willing to share this with the church and with the community. I'm extremely proud of him and Annie for setting that example and leading the way of practicing telling our stories. I want to read real quick Mark 5, which is where the inspiration for 519 came from, and then we're going to jump into Joshua's story. So in Mark 5, Jesus and the disciples have been traveling. They were just on the water. There was a major storm. Jesus calmed the storm. So in Mark 5, verse 1, it says, "So they arrived at the other side of the lake in the region of Gerasenes. When Jesus climbed out of the boat, a man possessed by an evil spirit came out from a cemetery to meet him. This man lived among the burial caves and could no longer be restrained, even with a chain. Whenever he was put into chains and shackles, as he often was, he snapped the chains from his wrist and smashed the shackles. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Day and night he wandered among the burial caves and in the hills, howling and cutting himself with sharp stones. When Jesus was still some distance away, the man saw him, ran to meet him, and bowed low before him. With a shriek, he screamed, 'Why are you interfering with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In the name of God, I beg you, don't torture me.' For Jesus had already said to the spirit, 'Come out of the man, you evil spirit.' Then Jesus demanded, 'What is your name?' And he replied, 'My name is Legion, because there are many of us inside this man.' Then the evil spirits begged him again and again not to send them to some distant place. There happened to be a large herd of pigs feeding on the hillside nearby. 'Send us into those pigs,' the spirits begged. 'Let us enter them.' So Jesus gave them permission. The evil spirits came out of the man and entered the pigs, and the entire herd of about 2,000 pigs plunged down the steep hillside into the lake and drowned in the water. Then the herdsmen fled to the nearby town and the surrounding countryside, spreading the news as they ran. People rushed out to see what had happened. A crowd soon gathered around Jesus, and they saw that the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons, He was sitting there fully clothed and perfectly sane, and they were all afraid. Then those who had seen what happened told the others about the demon-possessed man and the pigs. And the crowd began pleading with Jesus to go away and leave them alone. As Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. But Jesus said, "No. Go home to your family and tell them everything the Lord has done for you and how merciful he has been." So the man started off to visit the 10 towns of that region and began to proclaim the great things Jesus had done for him. And everyone was amazed at what he told them. And so our 519 series is inspired by this instruction that Jesus gives to this man. He says, go and tell people what the Lord has done for you. Go and tell people how merciful Jesus has been to you. Let's dive into hearing how merciful Jesus has been to Joshua and what he's done in Joshua's life. I want to do a quick disclaimer for parents. If you've got kids that are like 12 and under, if you feel like some of the content in this video might not be wise for them to sit through, there's going to be discussions about demon possession. There'll be mentions of things to do with sexuality. If you want to play it safe and have your kids join the kids ministry, then I encourage you to do that now. We're going to have maybe like a 1-minute countdown timer to give you a chance to get your kids down to the kids ministry and then come back up to make it in time to hear this discussion. And your house church leader can always pause the video too to create time for your group to do that. But I want to give you a heads up. If you're comfortable with your kids sitting through this, then that's totally cool. But if you'd rather have your kids go down to the kids ministry, then please do that. Buckle in. Let's jump into Joshua's story.
I live a life that I never even dreamed of. Like, I never dreamed of this. Like, I can't even imagine it any other way. That's how good my life has turned out, and I'm so thankful. So my real mother is born in Thompson, Manitoba, and she was a really beautiful woman. She met my father at a mission trip in Germany, and then I was born and raised in Germany, and I was very close to my Oma and Opa. And my Oma was a born-again Catholic, and so she really spoke a lot of things into my young life, taught me to worship God, and like as a young child, 3, 4, 5 years old. So those are all very beautiful memories. Yeah, then very quickly, my parents, I was too young to understand exactly, what took place, but they got divorced formally when I was 11, leading up to it was pretty messy. My mother was in multiple relationships or you know, whatever you want to call it, using sex to get attention or feel love, and was dealing with substance abuse, like medication and that. And we tried to stay away from home. You just didn't know what you were going to get, whether there was a naked man walking through your hallway, or it was pretty ugly. And I used quite a bit of alcohol from age 11 on to try and escape. Yeah, my mother, she tried her best with, you know, she had a hard childhood, as I understand. My Canadian grandfather, her father, was a World War II veteran and struggled with alcoholism and was abusive, physically abusive. Considering all that she came from, she did her best. And she was sort of like a single parent. Like, our father wasn't around. He was only home for 2 days on the weekend, and that was it. We would frequently take money from our mother's wallet or whatever to get food or whatever. Yeah, we were kind of looking after ourselves. I mean, it was constant chaos and up and down. Yeah, lots of different boyfriends coming and going, and then yeah. After my parents' divorce, like at around 12, 13, life became pretty dark. They both went to their old lifestyles, and our father still wasn't around. And when he then had us, he was very much excited about exploring drugs and different things, and was telling us about it, and was excited to take drugs with me in the future. And I was 13, and I thought, man, like, how am I going to survive these parents? Like, they're still my parents. I'm still under their care. Not sure exactly what age. Around 14, I smoked hashish with some older people I had met from school, and that night I started hallucinating and seeing demonic activity and seeing demons and all kinds of things, hearing voices. Not sure if you're conscious, if you're dreaming, if you're awake, if you're sleeping, and it wasn't going away. It was noticed in school. Like, the teachers had to shake me to sort of get me to some kind of level of consciousness. So I was constantly listening to rock music and playing television and noise. I had to be around groups of people, loud, to be distracted from the anxiety and the voices, or the feeling of beings around me, or like I was a prisoner of something or someone that never ever left. So when I went to sleep was the worst, because it's a quiet time, and so I'd sleep with my lights on, music playing. I remember one time we went on a field trip at a play, and I woke up into consciousness, not even knowing how I even got into my seat. My mother, she drove me to the appointments with the psychiatrist that then brought me to the youth mental hospital. So I guess, as bad as it sounds, that was helpful. The psychiatric hospital was a wonderful place compared to what I was experiencing at home. Being at that mental hospital felt like a safe place to be, because clearly I didn't have any choices over my life, not from being a child of my parents. I didn't have any choices of that, but now even more so, even the government sort of was deciding or parenting me. And as bad as it sounds, I felt somewhat secure in that, and had sort of abdicated my responsibility for my life into the hands of the government. Yeah, I made friends there, and there was breakfast every day at this time and lunch every day at a certain time, and there was routine and structure, and you feel like you're in a good place and this is your new home, until one of the teenagers there tries to break out, and the police shows up and the sirens go off, and you realize, oh my goodness, this is not where I'm supposed to be. So I was there for 9 months, and the doctors were busy trying to sort out with medication and counseling what my hallucinations came from, and they obviously couldn't find a solution, so they pumped me full of sort of antidepressant type medication that takes your emotional sensation away. I was released from the psychiatric hospital, went back to school, was in those days that I kind of was reaching my end of what I could take, and I thought, what am I gonna do? And I just didn't know how in the world I was possibly gonna do another year of this or the rest of my life. So I thought, God, if you're real, then you gotta come right now and show yourself, because otherwise I'm on my way out of here. As far as I was concerned, I wasn't like suicidal necessarily from depression, just logically thinking about it. I thought, if I have to live like this and continue like this, there's no point in sticking around for the whole thing. And I cried out to God in the night, and I didn't know if he was real or not, but I thought, if he's real, he's got to be real right now, or there's no time to waste in hanging out here on this earth. And then the next day, my auntie from Canada called me, and she said my uncle was going with the military to Bosnia, and I should come and stay with her for a couple months and catch a break. So I said yes, and I was like, forget it, I'll just walk away from all of this. And went to the travel agency and booked myself a flight to Canada, and 3 days later, I was on the way out, and that was like a miracle, that's it, I'm gone. Maybe there's a way to change the course of my life. Yeah, and then I came to Winnipeg, and it was amazing just to be out of the toxic environment that I was in Germany. Dick and Irene's daughter and son-in-law, they would pick me up on Friday evenings to go to a youth group. And they would just come, ring the doorbell, and that was an amazing feeling, like somebody is here to pick me up. Like it really made me feel, incredibly special, I guess, or loved, it's the better way to say it, yeah. And then, one of the youth pastors talked about Jesus, and it just all of a sudden dawned on me that was, maybe an actual option. I just prayed that salvation prayer, and I could feel like hot water kind of pouring right through my body and soul, and I was in tears and crying, and I just felt like as if when you meet somebody for the first time, like I met my father, like my heavenly father, and it was an overwhelming feeling. And then from there, I was just living on cloud nine. I realized I wanted to commit my life into Jesus's hands rather than my own, and I had failed so miserably and had no ability to manage my own life. I had nothing to give up other than pain and trauma. Nobody had to explain anything to me. I was just totally dying emotionally, and I felt the love of God and was delivered from all those spiritual attacks. And so immediately I believed in Jesus. I was like, I don't know a single scripture. I don't know how to read the Bible. I don't know any worship songs. I don't even understand the pastor, but I know Jesus is real. And the demonic oppression and everything then disappeared. I think it was like the next couple of days I would go down to the river where my auntie lived in Westwood, and I would sit on the riverbank and I could listen to the water. I could watch a bird flying, concentrate on it, and feel peace and not feel fear and terror. I was the happiest kid alive. I was free. And I thought this was all over until one evening at my auntie's house, I heard the door open, and I thought it was her in the evening, so I popped up. This was a couple weeks after I had prayed to Jesus the first time. and I saw this dead, rotting hand reach through the door and open my door from the inside, and I was kind of fainting, actually, physically almost, as I saw this kind of dead person kind of stepping into my room. But I just stood out in my room, out of my bed, and pointed at the being and said, "Get out of here in Jesus' name." And it listened and left. And so that was life-changing when I realized, hey, I can still encounter evil, I can still encounter fear and panic, but I'm not alone. The name of Jesus trumps all spirits because he's the King of Kings, the Lord of all lords, and there are spiritual lords. There's all types of spiritual activity that is all real, except that Jesus has authority over all of them. So having experienced that was life-changing. Yeah, I let my plane ticket expire because I never was going to go back to Germany, I said to myself. And my uncle came back from Bosnia and I guess put them in a spot where what are they going to do with this teenage boy? And then they said, "Where do you want to go?" And I said, "Well, drive me to Springs Church Sunday morning." And then I went in the front doors at Springs Church. That was the first time where I felt like slight panic, where I realized how bad this actually is. And I had my suitcases with me. Dick Penner was ushering and he saw me right away and he put his arm around me and introduced me to the fellow he was ushering with, as if the suitcases were invisible. And then we went to the front row at church and Irene was there. She was also helping out at church, and we sat down and I could tell that Dick whispered something in Irene's ear, and then, she embraced me and I just sat down with them at church as if nothing was anything. Yeah, I went home with Dick and Irene. That day we went and bought steel-toe boots because on Monday morning I was going to go to work at their business, and I was super excited just to plug into whatever they were doing or thought I should do.
Yeah, and how he came to be here was on one of his visits. I remember him standing at my desk in the kitchen, and he was wearing a Toronto Blue Jays hat, and he was just a little guy then. He was kind of wringing his hands, and he was saying, "Can I come and stay with you for 3 weeks?" And our daughters at that time were in their early 30s. So for me to think of having a teenager, I remember hesitating and thinking, a teenager, 3 weeks? Yeah, I think I can do this. And and that's kind of how the plan started. And I think it was maybe the first week that Josh came, and I was going to do some laundry, and I said, "Josh, you got anything to throw in?" And he came up and he brought his whole laundry basket up. And then and I was starting to make meals, like it had just been Dick and myself. So now I'm making pot roasts, cooking in big containers, and Josh had just a phenomenal appetite. There was never leftovers. If there was, they'd be gone the next day. So I'm in the laundry room kind of commiserating to God that I'm going to spend my whole summer in the laundry room and in the kitchen. And it was one of few times that I can say that God actually literally spoke to me. And of course, as we know, it was an impression in my mind. But he said to me, "I have taken this young man, put him in your home in Winnipeg, Canada, for you," the scripture that's in Proverbs, that for you to love him, to train him, and to nurture him in the way that he should go. But the thought that he trusted us with a life was just, at that moment, overwhelming to me. And so I literally went on my floor in the laundry room with face down. And I knew then that this was something I was doing for the Lord.
I don't think raising Josh was anything different than what we did as a family. Whether we worked in the backyard or front yard, it was what we did. It was nothing unusual. Wednesday nights, a lot of times we would go to church. It was just what we did. Oh, we had our father and son challenges, and I'm sure there were many, like when he built the ski ramp off the back of the patio, coming home, and that was not life or death. Or when he went and picked up the new machine from the shop and was going to drive it in the winter time to clear the snow on the lake, and the machine fell through and was in the water, and in the winter time, and trying to drag it out. Recall that, Josh? The Zoom boom, yeah. So those type of things, and those were all events and moments where we drew closer. And
one Wednesday night when we were coming home from church, and Josh was, like I say, he was just a little guy back then, and sitting in the back, and he said, can I ask you something? And it seemed like he'd pondered it for a while, and we said, sure. And he said, can I call you Mom and Dad? So needless to say, I don't know what Dick's first thought was, but I had like 100 flashes of what it means to be a mother. You can't say today, I'm going to be a mother, and then change your mind 3 months down the road, say, this really isn't working for me. You know, I saw it as a lifetime commitment, you know. Yeah, you can call us Mom and Dad.
I was so terrified, and I kept reasoning back and forth. If I ask them, they say no, then it's over for sure. Because I'd say count till 30, then ask them, count till 30, then ask them. I never did for weeks and weeks. Yeah, I felt like I had a home, like I belonged. That's it. I've arrived in life, you know.
what I would say to Josh today, I don't say this often enough to any of my family or even Irene, and that is that I'm very proud of what they have accomplished, far more so in the realm of raising their family or spiritually, because I feel that's where the success lies in life. But what I see in Josh is his determination. I saw that when I traveled with Josh, and that really hasn't changed now either. Very tenacious in what he does. I also know that there's not a thing that Josh wouldn't do for me.
Within Josh, there's always been that really a very tender heart. I think it's taken a long time there, to heal. And so I have just been so proud to see Josh just not give up. And a lot of people might blame their circumstances or whatever, but Josh has never had a victim mentality. And I really see that's why he's victorious. And I really feel very strong, and I've always felt that Josh would really make a powerful difference in a lot of people's lives because of who he is and the testimony that he has.
Yeah, after high school, I went to Master's Commission with Springs Church, the Bible school that they had, and just made really awesome friends that I never had like that before ever, maybe my first real friends. And then I went to university. I just felt so rich in love from my family and sisters and friends and the church and Jesus that I just really genuinely was praying. Like, was there anything, that was my prayer for months, is there anything I could do? And all of a sudden I just had sort of South Sudan come to my mind. I booked my flight, and 2 weeks later, I think just after Christmas, I was heading that way. So we spent the night at the South Sudanese border in that area in South Sudan. They had built grass huts, and they were taking care of 30 to 40 orphan children, Tijuk and Bitpin, and they're South Sudanese as well, and God had called them to South Sudan to take care of the orphans from the war, because they would just, kill the mothers or rape them, and the kids would just run off. And it was pretty brutal, like you see in the movies. We spent the night there, and in a bushfire, their huts burnt down. So then I realized, oh wow, I can stay here and rebuild this with them. Like, I don't know that much at the time in construction, but enough to do manual labor. And then I stayed there, and we rebuilt the school buildings, the dormitories, and made quite the nice facility. And that was the beginning of 8 years of just absolute privilege and joy and giving back to the kids there and the orphans. And at that time we had, I think, around 12, 13 teachers. We taught the kids English. So we had 350 children then. And it was a dream come true for a young man who loves, Jesus and adventure, and obviously has not the same, but a similar pain as a lot of the kids there. And that's basically, no parents, no one to teach them, no one for them to follow. So yeah, I was really close with so many of the kids. It was the time of my life. It's the best thing I've ever experienced. And we actually, saw people delivered from demonic spirits, because they have a lot of that down there, like witchcraft and witch doctors, and it's very normal in their culture. There was one particular teenage boy that was demon oppressed, like pretty severely. It was a spectacle. Like he was drowning himself in the creek. He was naked, bruised, foaming from the mouth, eyes rolled back white, like, as you would read out of the Bible or some story like that. Yeah, it was wild. So then we took him to a church, and T-Juck was an absolute mentor to me in those years. And he just looked at me and said, like, are you good to come in the church, or you want to stay outside? Then there was a couple other pastors there praying, and they commanded the demon out in Jesus' name. And the boy snapped to himself and covered himself right away. So we took him to the orphanage and washed him and gave him clothes, and he had dinner with us, and he gave his life to Jesus, and I loved it. Yeah, it was amazing, and it was just a gift from God that that you could give everything that you have to offer, and it's so needed. Wonderful, wild experiences. Yeah. They broke back out into civil war, and just before that happened, my partnership with T-Juck, the South Sudanese man that had started the orphanage initially, kind of blew up in 1,000 pieces. He started bringing in children for money from the government, and because we were the only school in the area or whatever. And he started shuffling out some of the orphans, and it was becoming a business rather than a ministry. So we had a disagreement, and that went really bad, that the whole ministry kind of fell apart and the kids kind of all dispersed. So it was very painful for me to walk away from all the kids and all that we were doing there. What did I do when I got back? I think this would be my biggest sin. I hardened my heart towards God because I felt He took this away, and it wasn't like I consciously thought that, but that's ultimately how I felt. Like, we could have done so much more. We could have had so many more kids. Like, why did this have to fall apart? And I sort of, unintentionally blamed God for it. And then I pursued business, because I had started a business to support the orphanage. And then I just kind of, illfully thought, well, let me put my purpose into trying to earn money, which is an absolute chase of the wind. Looking back, I learned a lot, but if I had to do it again, I'd do it different. Yeah.
And in the middle of this brokenness,
yeah,
you found your wife.
Yes, I did. Yeah, I did. Yeah. Well, in that time that I was praying and God spoke to me to go to South Sudan, it was in that year that my brother Samuel came to visit from Germany, and we all went to Mongo's. And Laura was serving us. She was our waitress. And Carla, my sister Carla, had known Laura from youth church and was talking to Laura. And I just overheard Laura sharing that she had, just had a baby girl, and then she was crying, and I didn't understand the conversation, but she had just come out of a relationship. So I was just praying for Laura. I felt really heartbroken for her, and we were driving back, and then after half an hour, I kind of, paying attention to what I was even thinking, thought to myself, why am I praying for this girl? And then the thought came to me, or the word kind of, she's your wife. And that really messed with me. I was like, what kind of funny business is this, Then at this church service, Laura's brother was there, and I recognized his last name, and I was like, I think that was that girl from Mongo's Grill.
I remember exactly how he walked in, because he just has this walk. And he came in so excited, and he sat down, and I was like, who is that guy? Anyway, so one day I'm downtown, I go to the passport office, and I walk past a cafe, and I just had this thought, gonna be eating breakfast. I'm gonna sit there with my husband later. It's like the most randomest thought. So I go to my car and I get in and I hear so strongly, Laura, loop around. And then I see Joshua walking and he's just strutting. And then I roll down the window because he was like my new friend at church. So then I'm like, hey, Joshua. And he sees me and he takes his briefcase and he goes like this. And so then he's like, puts it on and he's like, oh, hey. And so then I parked the car. So then we ended up actually going for breakfast at that little place I had walked by. And then Joshua calls me and he just says, do you want to go get something to eat after Bible study? And I just like had this knowing that he was gonna ask me to marry him, which was really bizarre because I'm such a dreamer. But anyways, and then we went out and Joshua basically told me, I met you 6 years ago and God told me that you're my wife. And so I want to marry you. Do you want to marry me? And then I was like, okay, sure. I think Joshua shows like vision and family, and he's not about shame. I've learned forgiveness, and yeah, I'm gonna cry.
That's okay. That's totally okay. So we're gonna take your time.
I guess I learned like that God wants like everything in the light, and so that because He loves us, so you can like. This is why I don't like interviews because I end up crying. I guess like Joshua has, when you have a past, the enemy will come and he'll use it against you. And so I've learned to be more courageous, but just like realizing that God is like, He doesn't shame us. And so I've learned like, I can tell Joshua anything of like anything, and he won't ever make me feel like shame. Did you know that? Now you do.
I see my kids and how they feel so comfortable and trust Laura and me. And I can't really relate to them, to be honest, but it makes me really happy. But I don't know exactly what that's like, but that makes me really happy.
Expand on that. What do you mean by you can't relate?
To how they feel secure in who they are and with us as their parents, you know, this is a sure thing. So I live a life that I never even dreamed of. Like I never dreamed of this. Like God has just turned that absolute pain and brokenness into something wonderful again. And I'm so thankful.
What an incredible story of the power of Jesus, of the power of the gospel, of the power of God. What emotions come to mind as you were listening to that story? What emotions were you feeling as you listened to that story? Can you relate to Joshua's story at all? Have you been delivered from something in your life? Have you experienced freedom from something in your life? What has restoration and redemption looked like in your life? I love how in Joshua's story, he goes from this place of not really feeling like he's got a safe place where he can feel a sense of belonging. And then he has this experience with Jesus, and then he eventually finds himself in a place where he feels like he's at home and has some belonging. And his journey with God actually leads him to a place where now he experiences love through Dick and Irene, and then later on, even love through Laura. And then now he's part of creating an environment where his kids can feel safe and secure and loved. Can you relate to that at all? Maybe you have a similar journey. Maybe you have similar experiences. Maybe you have been looking for a place you can call home. Maybe you found that place. There's so many questions that we could ask ourselves surrounding this story, and I don't want to limit the discussion that you're going to have in your house churches. But I want to give you just those 3 questions to think about. Is what emotions were you feeling as you listened? Can you relate to Joshua's story? And have you been delivered from anything? Jump into your house church, talk about that for a while, and then we're going to wrap things up in a little bit. Next week at our Winnipeg service, we're gonna sit down with Joshua and we're gonna have an in-person discussion with him, a live interview with him, where we get to talk about some of the other aspects surrounding his story and maybe even clarify a few things and go into detail about a couple of things. And really get to pick his brain on, hey, Joshua, what has freedom looked like in your life? I think it's important to note that when it comes to any one of our stories, that it's an ongoing thing, that it's never you've just arrived. You never get to a place where it's just done and done. God is continually working inside of us and transforming us and restoring us. That's an ongoing process. And so next week we get to chat with Josh about what that looks like in his life today. What's that ongoing process of restoration? What's that ongoing process of healing? I really encourage you to join us for that if you can make it out. I want to thank you so much for taking the time to sit through this story and to listen through and to join this discussion. I hope this time has been very valuable to you. To wrap things up, I'm going to invite the kids to come upstairs and join us. I'm going to ask the house church leaders to actually take time and hear from the kids' church workers and to hear from the kids about what they've been learning, about what God has been speaking to them. And then I'm going to ask your house church leader to actually close things off in prayer. Take time and hear any prayer requests from the group, from the kids, and then take time to submit them to God. Thank you so much for being on this journey with us. Thank you so much for pursuing Jesus with us. We're going to continue to do this together. If you need prayer, feel free to reach out. You can email us or you can reach out on our social media. We'd love to support you in prayer. And thank you so much for giving. If you'd like to give, you can give on our website or through our app. We're so grateful for your generosity. See you next time.